the conversation down. If y'all filing in, just sign the forms and. All right, we're good to go? Okay, it is Wednesday, October 26th. It is 6:04. We will call the Board of Adjustments meeting. First item on the agenda, item number 1 is the roll call. We'll go start down there.
Bob Turner.
Kevin Shell. Keith Martinson.
Jerry Spytel.
And Brad O'Donnell. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is public comments. And this is a time, if anyone wants to talk about anything that we're not talking, that isn't specifically written on the agenda today. If anyone has anything to say. Okay, usually not. So we'll move on to the consent agenda. Item number 2, this is to approve the minutes from May 25th, 2022. Would anyone like to move to approve the minutes?
So moved.
I will second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. The ayes have it, I guess we should say. Let's move on. Well, I guess I'll say the board has approved the minutes at 6:06. Okay, now moving on to the regular agenda, item number 3. It is still 6:06. Public hearing, discussion, and possible action on a request for a special exemption under the City Code of Ordinances, Section 107-491A1, to permit the reconstruction of the non-conforming tennis courts at the Western Hills Athletic Club located at 4801 Rollingwood Drive. So first we'll hear comments from staff, I think? Yes, staff.
All right, so I am just here to let y'all know, y'all got 2 items that you will be hearing from representation from Western Hills Athletic Club. Can y'all raise y'all's hand real quick, just who will be speaking for the applicant? Just the applicant?
Well, I signed up to speak on the board.
Okay, perfect. All right, so those are the members that you will be hearing, and then we've got public comment on that. Desiree, do we have public comment? I mean, yes, ma'am. Okay, so we do have several for that, just once we're ready for that. So I just want to direct your attention to the agenda item summary sheet. That is where it lays out everything for what you will be determining, as well as in your packet the application with the plans as submitted to us, as well as a few emails and letters from citizens regarding the issues. And then we'll have a few people that will come up and speak with that. So,
Could you just tell us a quick couple of sentences on what is being proposed and why the city
Sure.
has made them come?
sure. So Western Hills Athletic Club is asking for a special exception to Section 107.35D, which is not allowing their tennis courts currently to be constructed in the area between the building setback and the lot line. And then Section 107-2421, which is requiring a 30-foot greenbelt zone between the northern property line and the tennis courts.
Okay.
So with that, y'all have the criteria of the special exception requests that are within the code of 107-491C. And so they will need to, well, y'all, the board, will need to find the special findings, and y'all do have the fact-finding form. So we'll go through that as y'all, the board, will be determined.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Before the applicant comes up, I just want to ask council, I know she brought up sections of the code that are pertinent, but for a special exception, are we considering portions of the code specifically, or are we just giving a special, do we just grant permission for an act?
Your code has the provisions that you will be looking to, what the applicant is requesting is what you will be looking to as far as applying the requirements for making those findings.
Okay. Do we need to have them specify portions of the code?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Okay. Then next, we will call the applicant to give a presentation. And if you could state your name and who you're with, I would appreciate it.
My name is Zach Elkins. I'm speaking on behalf of Western Hills Athletic Club, and I have at least two other members here who might fill in cracks in my presentation. This has been going on for a little while now before my time, and so they know a little bit more of the background, but I'll start at least. And I should say also, since this has been going on a long time, I really appreciate the patience of members of the Board of Adjustments and the staff who've been very helpful. And also, people have given feedback and comments and concerns, all of which I would say we share at some level, and we're working as carefully as possible to attend to those and to collaborate. Actually, so I'm going to show some slides, actually. I think these are the same slides that you have in the need packet. And so you have slides that I'll speak from, but then also there's a full set of plans that include drainage, et cetera, and those are at the end almost as a supplement. So if those things come up, we'd be happy to address them. And in fact, we have two members of our landscape architect team who did the designs and the engineering calculations, and so they can speak more carefully about those calculations, and certainly we can. So maybe what if we, I think if we just hit this and then just scroll down. Okay. So we can't enter or space. Okay, so this is a summary. There are really two substantive constraints on the project, and I'll get to those in a little bit. But the point of the project really is to reconstruct the tennis courts. We're in bad shape, and also to replace a volleyball court, which is out of use, and replace them with a combination of pickleball tennis courts. Incidentally, the project will improve the drainage and improve, in our eyes, the landscaping. This is a bit of a background. And one reason why we're here is that the club goes way back, 1968. And that building, I guess, preceded this building right here by a few years, and all came out of this Optimist Club parcel of land, which then became the park, I think formally in the 1990s. I'm getting all this information from the Rollingwood City website, which is really amazing on this historical timeline. Tennis court was built in 76, the volleyball court in 84. All of this, importantly, before, as I understand it, any of the city code came online, at least the current city code. So you can see also satellite view I just pulled off of Google of the part of the property where we're going to propose to replace these courts. And so the current courts, which importantly include this 14-foot berm in between the two courts, which I'll talk about in a second, also include these volleyball courts, all of which the volleyball courts combined with the tennis courts from about the baseline of the tennis courts to the end, sort of the top of that, are not in conformity. So they're, in terms of our calculations, we'd be increasing, with this proposed project, increasing the nonconformity by about 10%. And we get that from about 80 feet of volleyball court plus the 120 feet of tennis court and then the 14-foot berm. The current out of compliance number is about 214 feet and linear feet going across. And then we're proposing a set of 4 courts which would go 240 feet. So that difference of 26 feet would be an increase of about 10% in nonconformity. There's a lot, the courts are in really bad shape, and I think that's pretty well known and probably uncontroversial. The lower court probably looks the worst, but is actually the better of the two courts. Cracks everywhere, some of them pretty dangerous. Affects ball bounces, but then also any movement on the court. This is the top court. Fewer cracks, but a really poor foundation. I think in previous iterations of remodeling, they've essentially just resurfaced it, and the foundation was poor, leading to a lot of dead spots. Virtually unplayable. Most of us won't play on that court. I happened to take this picture while somebody was playing, which, you know, you do what you have to do. The fencing is unsightly, it's leaning, it's missing parts. We're gonna do this we would do this as ecologically as possible, in part because my wife is the director of sustainability at the University of Texas, and she would not allow us to do otherwise. So we were gonna recycle the fencing to a scrap yard and most of the other materials as well that we would tear up. This is the berm that I mentioned earlier. It's about 14 foot in width, and we save, if we were to build a wall, which I think is optimal anyway, much more sightly, much more functional, we would shrink the width of the court from its current 136, that is for the two courts that are in current use, from its width of 136 to 120, and so, 134 to 120, so we save that 14 feet, which is nice. Here's a better look, I think, in some ways, of what we're going to do. The one half of this is as I mentioned, replacing the tennis courts, which are badly worn, but then also replacing the volleyball court for a number of reasons. One, because the volleyball court, in my history of living in this community since 2008, has never once been used except for cats. You see it as a litter box. Sometimes kids from the swim team will go down there and do what they'll do between swims, but it's not used for its intended purpose. I love volleyball, and it's a great sport, but for whatever reason, it's not bringing flocks of people out to play. We'd like to replace it with a combination of pickleball, tennis, pickleball, and we'll talk about some of the perhaps downsides of pickleball. It comes with some costs, is all the rage. In our member survey, we have 80% of members saying they want to play pickleball, 75% saying they want to be involved in tennis at some level, so there's some interest in both tennis and pickleball. Importantly, pickleball is something that's, it's something that all ages do. If you're on the UT campus and wander on a fraternity, you'll find a pickleball court. Every single fraternity has one, but more importantly, it's great for seniors and the elderly. And our sense, we adopt this, what is, I guess, this principle and design of 8 and 80, which is that every park and every facility should be accessible for both 8-year-olds and 80-year-olds. And this is a real liability of our club. In part, it's great for kids and for the swim team, but once kids get into college, not as great. Tennis courts, not great, and there's not much going on after that. Our thought is pickleball/tennis would be a nice answer to that. Pickleball is obviously something that's not as athletic. If you have physical impairments, you can take it up easily. If you have zero skills, you can take it up easily. It's great as you age, and it would bring, I think, a much more intergenerational element to both the club and the city. And we're not betting on pickleball entirely, in part because we're just not sure that the trend's going to continue. It's great, everybody's into it now, but who knows 10 years from now. And so in that sense, we think a combination pickleball, tennis court would be ideal and most flexible. Tennis obviously is another sport that ages well. You can do it your entire life. So both those sports would add to our intergenerational component here. We're, as much as possible, trying to prevent Rollingwood senior citizens from moving to Sun City, where they have amazing pickleball tennis courts, and do that here in Rollingwood. This is just to give you a sense of what a combination court would look like. I took an aerial shot of the court on Hatley, which is striped for both pickleball and tennis, and you can see they've actually used both ways to stripe a pickleball court. One is to use the baseline, this is the top court, to be the center line for the court, and this way you don't have to have too many overlapping lines. And then the one on the right, they use the baseline for one of the side courts. And so it's either, I'm not sure why they went with both, but they may be covering their bets, but we would imagine something like this for our court. Okay, so Brad, the question was whether we should identify the constraints, the zoning constraints, and these are what they are. I think they're probably familiar to most of the board, since we've now been before the board twice, not this time for special exception, but in previous times for variances. The first time we came before the board, we were granted all 3 variances, and then it was discovered that we hadn't, or the city hadn't noticed the entire community, as you have to do for a park property, which this is, and so that was disqualified, and we came back a second time, and we were granted 2 out of the 3 variances, and that's important. I should say the variances are all relate to the setback, even though there are 3 of them. So the first one prohibits building at a setback because of the green belt, because we're a park property, and any property between the park and a residence needs that 30 feet. The bottom one, 10735, is a specific provision for tennis courts in the code, and it's the same, effectively the same constraint. You can't build in the setback, but for a different reason. So we were granted variances last year for both of those, 107-242 and 107-35. We were not granted the variance for the section 107-422, and these are my summaries, by the way, of the code. I could take 4 or 5 slides to write the whole thing down, but I think the city attorney will probably agree that this is a fair representation of these. But importantly, in laying this out, we realized that in being granted the variance for 107-242 and 107-35, we have effectively been approved for the project. And I say that because these things, although we thought, and the whole board and pretty much everybody thought, were independent and that each one was necessary, in fact, that's not. These are interdependent. Not only they all relate to the same topic, but the second one, the nonconformity reference there, is about the setback. So if we're granted variances for the setback for the 2 reasons, we are in essence not nonconformity, because under the principle that if you have granted a variance, it's now conforming. So since it's now conforming, I know this is it's a logic game, and this is why most of us didn't get it at the time, but since it's not now conforming, the 107-422 doesn't apply to us. And that might be confusing. We've presented this to the board when we discovered it last Thursday at 2 a.m. when I woke up in the middle of the night. And you only really see this because we put the slide together, and we see, like any sort of logic game on, say, the LSAT, you only see it once you start writing down the problem, and we discovered that. And so we now think that that second meeting with you, in which we were granted 2 of the 3 variances, was all we needed to do the project. And so we presented that to the city, and they let us know that, well, okay, if that's the case, those variances have expired. And in our sense, none of us knew, including the Board of Adjustments, nor the city staff, that that's all we needed. And now we know that that's all we needed. In fairness, we would ask you to just give us an extension on those variants to build that. If that's not possible, then we'd certainly be willing to go ahead with the special exception, which I'll talk about right now. This gives you a sense of why we're asking for the special exception. It's for properties that are non-conforming for reasons, for a variety of reasons. One is that somebody might defy the code and just build something that's non-conforming. That's not our case. Obviously, this club was built in 1968, presumably before this code was written. I don't know when this code was written, but it was well before this code. And so we are in non-compliance only because we predated the code, which I think is an important difference. This is not a property that was built in defiance of the code. This gives you a sense, I think a better sense, this is drawings by our architects here, of what the proposed site would look like. And you can see the red line is the setback, and you can see the bit of the court that would extend into the setback, again, extending our non-compliance by 10%. And importantly, you can see what we would have to do if we were to build this in compliance. And so you can see that it would take out part of our sport court, which is that structure on the top left. It would encroach on the parking area, and it would mean taking out this absolutely beautiful tree, which graces the front of the property. It stands between the parking lot and the tennis courts, and as we imagine building out this structure, that would be the front piece of what we think would be a beautiful tennis facility. So you can imagine people coming for tennis, gathering under that tree, looking out, watching their kids play, waiting to play their competitor who they're waiting to trounce, and then enjoying themselves after the match. And that tree we want to preserve. Were we not to have the special exception, we would have to take that tree out and build into it, and build into parking, and build into the structures. There are other trees, of course, and that our site will take out, and that's really to our chagrin. I'll talk about those in a little bit. But this is the language, since you asked for it for the special exception. In terms of the board's prerogative to do this, we think that it has that because it, in subsection 2 there, specifically says that a non-conforming building, assuming it's something that they want to continue, and I think in our case, this is a local landmark that all of us want to see continue. If you want to see it continue, there is the provision for enlarging it. And the conditions for doing so are laid out in subsection C, and I've highlighted what those are, and I will say this is a little repetitive. The second clause essentially says you can do this so far as it doesn't compromise public convenience and welfare, and then it goes on to say, and you can do this as long as it doesn't compromise public health, convenience, safety, or general welfare. So you can see the second set of conditions is includes this subset in the second clause, and so incidentally we would suggest that this could be cleaned up, and I don't know if you do amendments to the code. Of course you do. You might just take out that second clause since it's redundant with the first one, because it's redundant with the second. But anyway, our argument is that the site that we propose, the structure we propose, would have a very positive impact on each of these concepts, and it would have some costs, which I'll talk about in a second, but for the most part, it would be a net positive, and this is what we think they are. I mentioned that we are striving for this 8 to 80 design, in which we want to connect generations and have grandparents and the middle-aged like me and our kids hanging out in the same facility, both members of the club and non-members. And so we see this as a benefit for the community, since in part the facility is a gem of Rollingwood, and we have a very aggressive guest policy that and relaxed guest policy that allows all sorts of programming for non-members, masters swim, year-round swim. We propose something similar for tennis, in which we would have a Rollingwood City tournament in both pickleball and tennis every single year, and that would include both members and guests. We would also have leagues that would include both members and guests, and you could take us seriously on that, because I don't think we could field a league team if we didn't have guests. And so we see this really as an indirect and a direct benefit for the community. The second thing is it'll increase social capital. All of us are, retreating to our phones constantly. This is one of the few moments where you can get out and hang out. And I don't mean that to be, I don't want you to take that to be a very insincere speculation by any means. Most of my friends, when I was in tennis leagues 20 years ago, came from the tennis leagues, and that is a big part of when you're actively doing something and actually using your free time for recreation. I think that becomes a big part of your social life. So that's really an important aspect of this. It's right now, I would rank it as the worst, or the set of tennis courts in Austin. One of the worst, not the worst, but among the worst. Our goal is to build the most beautiful set of tennis courts in Austin. comparable to the courts at St. Stephen's, Westwood, and Terry House. So if you do it right, they can blend beautifully into the community with excellent landscaping, and I think they could be a big part of just the built environment that just graces the community. The fourth is recreation, and this gets to health. I think that's self-evident. 5, I think a lot of people move here for the park and for the club. I don't think anybody would dispute that. This only increases the value of the club and the reputation of the city. When people think about the city, they think about these things. In fact, if I mentioned the Rollingwood history on the City of Rollingwood page, most of it is dedicated, the photos and the timeline are dedicated to Western Hills. It's clearly a big part of Rollingwood. 6, landscaping, and here I want to talk about the trees a little bit. We think it'll be a net improvement to the landscaping. We are taking out some very beautiful trees just to the sides of the court. There's no dispute about that, and I'll take a backseat to nobody when it comes to enjoying trees and loving trees. I've put 10 on my property about 15 years ago, and they're absolutely beautiful now. All that to say is that if you put trees and plant them in the appropriate places to grace whatever else is going on in your property, I think it can be a much more appropriate solution to balancing activities and trees. Our landscaping plan is great, I think. It can probably be improved. If you have suggestions of other specimens and species which we've received, we're happy to consider those. We have no strong feelings. We're not dogmatic about what kind of tree. We also are considering some understory trees. Our landscape architect talked about this because the critters and everything, they love trees, but they also love the understory stuff even more, and so we want to contribute to the ecology there. The drainage plan, I'm not competent to talk about the calculations there, but our architects assure us that in the drainage plan that they've devised, we've actually improved upon the status quo. So right now, we have rain gushing with any rainfall, anywhere and everywhere. I don't think it's been a particular problem, although it might be, but what we're building is actually going to improve upon that. And so that'll be a net improvement. And finally, we just see this as a local landmark, and all of us want to restore it to its former grandeur, or even better than that. And we think this site improvement plan will do it. All right, I appreciate that. Other members of the board are here, including Brian Nash and Marie Timmerman, who've worked tirelessly on that. So I'll turn it over there if they have anything to add or clarify.
Before anyone speaks more, we do have a 20-minute time limit, which I think you were roughly there. We normally don't enforce that because no one actually talks that long. It's okay. But so, we want everyone to give everyone a chance to talk. So please talk, but just, try to keep time into. So are you representing the applicant, or are you?
Yeah, I do. I'm on the board of the Western
Okay.
Hills Athletic Club. In the interest of brevity, would give you a couple of supplemental points in about a minute and a half.
Okay.
I think, if that's okay.
Sure.
Brian Nash. I'm also a property owner at Fort Chris Cove. So I'm interested in this project on a couple of levels, but I'm a board member for the Western Hills Athletic Club. Zach did an amazing job of walking through the analysis. I was taking notes to see if he missed anything. I don't think he really did. But the few points that I guess I'd point out that might be germane to your consideration is that typically you're reviewing things in the context of a variance request. And that's a very high standard. I know you guys know that. And it involves things like identifying a hardship. This special exception is a different provision. So I'd just remind that you kind of analyze it under that. I would argue that it's a sort of a lower hurdle or a lower burden. It's certainly a different analysis, though, and that was what Zach just put up earlier, which is whether it's any detriment to the city's welfare, safety, or health of the community and the people. So it's a different sort of standard of review. I just would ask that you kind of keep that in mind. I did think it was valuable to mention that in connection with the prior Board of Adjustment proceedings, where we were here on the variance requests, we did seek out and get written approvals from the surrounding property owners. So there are two neighboring properties, one off of Pleasant Cove and one off of Wallace. And we had written sort of letters from each of them based on these same plans that had approved that. Now, the property at Pleasant Cove has since changed hands, and we're in a dialogue with those owners. I think they're receptive to it. We're talking with them. We weren't able to sort of have them put together anything by tonight, but it's certainly something that we're making sure that we're sort of cooperative with the surrounding landowners, and I thought that would be a helpful data point as you consider this. Third, I guess, or 3 and 3.5, there have been prior approvals on some of the subject matter that I think you're probably going to hear about today and that may be points of discussion. So, parking plan. That was previously been presented to the city council and approved. So that's not something that's necessarily within the Board of Adjustments purview, but we did do a parking plan for this project, and then that was approved by city council. The same is true for the landscaping plan. That's a question that when you're doing a landscaping plan in a zone that's marked for park or mixed use like this, it's presented to the city council, and the city council has approved the landscaping plan. And similarly, the tree ordinance issue is also presented to city council, was presented to city council, and city council approved the tree ordinance. So where you see us taking out trees, we've actually proposed in our landscaping design to add more than just what was required by the tree ordinance, and that was approved by the city council in a prior iteration. So you'll see there's like sycamores and some elms and some other trees that are proposed there. So I just wanted to make sure I'd kind of hit those points. I didn't want to belabor anything. Certainly we are prepared to answer any questions and would love to kind of dialogue with you about it. Thank you.
I do have a question for y'all, but does anyone else that's representing y'all have anything to say?
Well, I am no longer actually on the board. I didn't sign up to make comments.
Okay, yeah, there's time for that, just anyone that's directly related. Okay, so this is relating to your slide, excuse me, your slideshow. If y'all could go to slide, it's either 13 or 14, the one that has the map with the courts. I was looking over this last night and just that one there. Okay, so prior, and I know this is a completely different thing from the variances before, and we will treat it as such, but my curiosity really wants to know, so with the variances, my interpretation of the variances that we gave was that you could completely redo the courts. You could rip them up and put them back in those two, and that's why we granted the two of those, but we didn't grant the third, so you couldn't expand them into there. So my question is why did you not just rebuild the two courts and then move the other two courts down 10 feet? I mean, you've had years to do this at this point, I almost feel like, but like.
It does feel like years. I don't know. You could probably say months.
Sure, months.
The building permit application that we filed, which is still pending,
Okay.
is based on the forecourt design that we've submitted. And so, with that approval to redo the two, that's not a plan that we have.
Well, I mean, when you asked for the variance, you got enough to build the four courts, and yet you haven't.
Correct. So I guess we're here under.
I mean, we're gonna
So-
treat this as it is separately, but it seems like you've pretty much had everything that you need to have moved forward. I'm just very curious why you didn't.
So what you're proposing is kind of a hybrid of what you see here. It would be where the blue hash, the other two courts would be where the blue hash is.
Yeah, they just moved down like 10
and
feet,
we'd take
15
out
feet.
all of those other trees that you see. So the reason why we didn't move forward on that is a couple of points. I'll defer to Zach to answer more fully. But number one, we spent tens of thousands of dollars already on a plan. We hired landscape architects, engineers, and others to do all of the work that we did. So there's a whole drainage design study based on the plan that we did. And there's a water retention system with a whole detention pond underneath the fourth court there. That would all have to get redone. All the other engineering work, all the landscape design plans, the tree plans, all that we got approved by the city, that would have to be redone. So it took us months of work and lots of dollars to get to the plan that's in front of us. And so the reason we didn't just redo it is because it's just simply not that simple. But Zach might have some better points and say it more elegantly.
No, definitely not that, but I understood your question a little bit differently, Brad. Like, I thought you were asking, okay, we have the variances to build what we proposed.
Not
You're saying
as
the blue?
that. You
or
had enough variances to completely redo the existing courts, and then you could have built the other two courts by just moving them 10 feet lower, 15 feet lower out of the 30-foot setback.
So if I can figure out how to go back on this, I will. 'Cause yeah, there's no page. Did you do back to this?
He pulled it off.
Oh, you didn't?
Backspace did it. Oh, now you're doing something else.
What page would you like?
To the set of variances that Brad was referring to, so, yeah, right there. Okay, so our contention now, and this is, our understanding only based on right now. In retrospect, our contention is that you gave us, approval to do exactly what we proposed.
Okay, well,
before
that's
courts.
that's trying to find a loophole in what we said, which we're not here to argue with about.
Oh, I thought you were
at all.
asking, why didn't we go
No.
ahead with what you approved? 'Cause-
No.
Okay.
As far as I was concerned, after the last meeting we had, you had enough. You didn't have enough to do exactly what you wanted, but you had enough to build the 4 courts.
Well, 107-242 gives us approval to build a setback for the 4 courts we designed, right?
It gives you
What we
to
presented.
rebuild something there.
Well, we proposed the 4 courts that we're proposing today in the place we're proposing today, and you guys granted 107-242.
Okay, you're starting down a line of thought about something that we're not here to discuss.
All right, well, I was just trying to answer your question. I thought you were asking, why didn't we build what we
Just
proposed?
move the 2 courts down. Or if you thought
Well,
you could do
yeah,
that, why didn't you
Brian's
submit a plan for it?
Well, we
I mean,
didn't
it's-
build the Blue Line one because it would take up the sport court, which is suboptimal. It would take out that big tree, which is the big circle,
Yeah.
and it would also encroach on the parking lot. We would basically lose parking.
You lose all these trees here.
Well, no, I'm not
No,
talking
no.
about that.
He's talking about,
This big one here.
Ryan, he's talking about taking your 2 new courts and just pushing it down 20
Yeah.
feet.
Well, they would have to get shifted this way.
Why?
It's in that
I'm
blue
not
space.
a design engineer.
I mean, it seems like just running parallel with the old 2 courts, and you go down 20 feet, and you're 30 feet back from the setback.
And y'all have had unquestionable right to do that for months.
To build the 2 courts. Is that-
Build all 4 courts. 2 of them would be in compliance. The 2 of them, you got approval to rebuild the uncompliant ones. And then 2 of them would be in in compliance.
I mean, if somebody wants to donate $100,000 for us to redo all the designs, I think we could probably.
Just because you did the design first before you got approval for it isn't the city's fault. I'm sorry, I'm going beyond what we should.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
Well,
Um,
let me ask one question, just,
okay.
I need a clarification on what he's just,
I used to be on the board and I have a little bit more historical knowledge about why.
If you would
Oh,
like
who are
to
you
go up to
using?
the podium, please, and state your name and address.
So part of the reason why that design plan wouldn't work, I'm sorry, Marie Timmerman, I live at 501 Vale Street. I was formerly on the WAC Board of Adjustments, not WAC Board, WAC Board, and this is my 3rd hearing. I've been at all 3 of these hearings and have presented in the past. So if we were to move part of the problem, and David, our engineer, could explain this maybe a little better, if we move those 2 courts down, the other issue that we run into is there is a TCEQ approved water quality pond, is that what it is? So that would interfere with that. And so that is
That's not
another.
built though, right?
It's built.
Okay.
So that was something that was built when we had done the reconstruction of the clubhouse, is my understanding, and so we would be encroaching on that, which,
So they either have to be in line or you're not gonna do it at all?
I mean, yeah, I think that's, I mean, yeah,
Okay.
that's the problem. I hope that helped explain why
Sure,
that.
I mean, yeah, it's,
So,
I just wanted to. Go ahead. I didn't understand what Mr. Elkins was saying when, I thought I heard him say the pool has everything they need to move forward with this today. And if that's true, what are you asking for tonight?
So we discovered that only 5 days ago. Our understanding, based on that last Board of Adjustments hearing, was that we needed all 3 variances. Because the zoning review basically said you need all 3.
Okay.
And then we realized only later that 2 were sufficient, and the 3rd was just a dependent clause on the other 2.
Okay.
And so that's only understanding now, really only after we wrote that out.
But I'm hearing you say you don't need this meeting to move forward.
Well, we do. We proposed to the city that we cancel this meeting, in part because we think we have everything we need. And I still think we have everything we need. However, the city replied that those variances expired. And
Okay.
our sense is that that's unfair because nobody had the understanding that
Okay.
we were able to move forward. And, yeah.
I'm sympathetic to that, but just to clarify, we're not talking about variances tonight.
Right.
That issue's not on the table.
Not on the
Correct, so we
agenda.
are talking about 2
I just
exceptions.
mentioned that for context.
Okay, thank you.
So, we have in front of us 2 special exceptions. Which my take is one's Court 1, existing Court 1 and Court 2, and the other is Court 3 and Court 4. I'm not clear, are y'all talking about putting pickleball courts on all 4, or on just the additional 2 that you are trying to get?
I don't know that there's been a specific plan on that specific question. Like, I don't know that we've come up with a striping plan yet as to what we would do. I will clarify that it's presented as 2 items. We considered this to just be the same item. I don't really understand how it's really broken down. Bless you. And the only other thing was just that sometimes it's, I think, a little bit lost that for Court 3 and 4, a good portion of that is actually already a non-conforming volleyball court. So it's taking what's non-conforming from the volleyball court, turning that into Courts 3 and 4, shrinking that berm. And that's why when Zach was up here earlier, he said it's only like 14. So I just, to clarify on that point.
Brett, I have a question. You said that you got permission, you got approval from 2 of the neighbors and working on another one. Do they approve just on tennis, or do they approve on tennis and pickleball? I mean, do they know what pickleball is all about?
So we presented them the plans that are in this packet.
Which are tennis courts?
Yeah, I'm not sure, to be honest, Keith. That's a good question. I didn't have the direct dialogue on that. I'm not sure if other of our board members here did, but, and it was the 2 of 2 property owners at the time. Now one of the property owners sold, and it's a new property owner, and so we're just having the same conversation with the new property
No,
owner.
you're talking about that property on,
Marie's
The McMahon.
more knowledgeable and more eloquent on this.
what
So.
about people across the street on Wallace?
We did not get approval. So the background on this is, in our first Board of Adjustments meeting, we got a conditional approval from the Board of Adjustments if we got the neighbors that abutted the property, that shared a property line with us. If we got those residential neighbors to approve our plans, that they would grant us the variances. We did that. We got those letters, and that was from, and I apologize if I'm butchering their names, the Goyels, and then the Schoolfields. I spoke to the Schoolfields personally. I believe they're both still residing in those residences. The neighbor that Brian is speaking about, there was a neighbor, the McMahons, that I believe sold their house or were under contract 2 days after the hearing, but that's neither here nor there. They were concerned that they live downstream and they were concerned about drainage. My answer to that is that we have an approved drainage plan. It was designed by a professional engineer. It was approved by a city hired engineer and reviewed. And so in my mind, I feel like the answer to that is we've adequately addressed drainage. That's the historical thing behind it. So we do still, I believe, have the two neighbors that wrote the letters that, would be not getting the benefit of the 30-foot green belt. They are still okay with the project, as far as I know. There is a new neighbor that lives in the McMahon's house they were concerned about the drainage.
Keith, if I understand the direction of your question, pickleball is different from tennis. More people, more noise. This was point 3 in Brooks' supplement to this packet. And we recognize that. We realize that pickleball is potentially noisier and something that we're fully committed to deal with. Right now on our backboard, we have a sign posted prominently saying no tennis before 9 a.m. And so we have a strict rule about that because we recognize that is a little more noisy than normal tennis. We've been studying noise levels in pickleball, learning that I think the most comparable study we found was of a site that looks almost exactly like ours, and they found an increase of about 6 decibels from ambient noise levels for pickleball, which I'm not sure is right. We're going to look at other studies, and ideally what we would do is a noise study right here itself. We'll put 4 or 5 groups of people playing pickleball, measure that compared to ambient noise, compared to tennis, compared, of course, to the 2-stroke engines blowing, with leaf blowers, et cetera. There's a lot of, different producers of noise, but we recognize that the sport is, I think, changing because of that. Some people are using softer balls instead of the wiffle balls, and rackets are changing, and I think this is an issue much larger than rolling wood. It's an issue with pickleball itself, and I think we're not committed to doing anything that's going to disrupt the noise in the community. We live there too. Nobody wants that, and so we're committed to working with the neighbors and everybody else about developing policies that keep the noise down, if in fact it is a problem. I don't know if it's a problem. People play basketball in their driveways all the time. Basketball is the same noise level as pickleball. Nobody's complaining about basketball. There's, as I know, 3 neighbors have pickleball courts in my neighborhood. I've never heard it. There's that court on Hatley, which I don't know, seems to have a lot of people playing pickleball. That's probably noisier than some at the wrong hours. I don't know, but we're a club committed to doing the right thing. We're not some random residents flouting the law. So.
I just know it's a potential problem. Wall Street Journal even had an front page article on pickleball noise a while back. So
I think it's a real
there.
issue. I do, yeah.
And what scares me is you can put as many as 8 or 4 pickleball courts on a tennis court, which is pretty crowded, but usually you put 2. So if you have 4 tennis courts, that means 8 pickleball courts. That means you have 8 pickleball games going at the same time. So it's a lot of whacking.
That's a lot of whacking. You said it, not me. But like that, I did repeat it. That's true. All right. The striping that we're thinking about, Keith, is that the one I showed, I think.
Yeah, they're on the baseline.
They're on the baseline. I think that's optimal, in part because there are 3 different designs. One is the one up there on Hatley. The other is the one you mentioned, 4 courts on 1 single tennis court, and the other might be the best actually, 1 pickleball court per tennis court. And the advantage of that is it utilizes the net. You don't have to have extra nets in there. And it really depends on our demand. I don't imagine so much pickleball that we need more than 2 on 1 court. That to me seems like the target, or at least where we start.
Well, my fear would be last time, one of the presentations was about having more. If you had 4 tennis courts, you'd start having tennis tournaments. Now you might start having pickleball tournaments, which means you'd be going all day long with people playing a lot of games. Fans maybe cheering on the sidelines. It could be a little bit noisy.
I think that's something we'd have to be really careful about. I think a pickleball tournament would be amazing for the community, but I think it should be only done during, maybe a Saturday between 10 and 2, where people know that it's happening. I don't honestly know how uncomfortable that would be for people. I don't think it would be that bad, to be honest, but I think that should be explored before we even have a pickleball tournament. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Wait, before you step away. What? Mr. Hawkins, step back. I don't know if we're gonna have full-on questions here on
Well,
this
I mean,
section or
I
not,
figured,
but-
yeah, because they just presented, we're
Okay.
questioning their presentation.
So my question is, you brought up the picture of the Hatley, the private courts on Hatley.
Yeah.
Did you speak with any of the surrounding neighbors of that property and get their opinions on?
We did a
What living
little
next
bit
to
only
that is
because,
like?
well, Brian is across the street from that, or?
down the street by
down-
Brian lives almost a block away from
And you
Corky.
live, yeah, Keith, you live apart.
Yeah, but I hear it every morning, when I walk by Corky's house, I hear it every morning about 7 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, I understand that they're playing it from 6:30 to 8, which to me seems like the exact wrong time to be playing pickleball if you're worried about noise. And as I mentioned, we have a policy of only playing against the backboard at 9. I would imagine something comparable for pickleball if we had it at all. Yeah.
So the question I asked is, did you speak to any of those residents around that court to get their opinion about this project?
Brian.
That have to live with this?
Well,
And
I
Brian,
think
Brian?
Keith
Go
and
ahead.
Brian are neighbors. They'd spoken about it. Brian mentioned that conversation to me.
It's a
and- yeah.
concern, as Zach mentioned. I mean, I didn't canvass the area. I think what Zach's trying to, or what he's mentioned already, is we're sensitive to the fact that there's potential noise issues. Just like I think when we put in the backboard, however many years that went out, there was definitely a rule about no earlier than 9 a.m. And I know enough about the reaction to what's going on Hatley that it's a sensitive topic. I think Keith knows that too. And so, I think pickleball is something we are interested in doing. I would be surprised if we end up striping all of these courts to do pickleball. I would tell you, I'm pretty certain we won't be striping them all to do 4 on each. That sounds crazy. But I do think what we're trying to do is find the right balance with the surrounding property owners. And that's part of why we started that dialogue, is to make sure that we're including them in the conversation. And that process isn't done because, frankly, we're just not even sure where we're going to be and whether we're going to be able to move forward on that. So, I mean, we all have day jobs as well. We're doing as best as we can. We've volunteered for this board on the pool. So we're blocking and tackling, so to speak. So we're hoping to have more conversations about the best way to do pickleball if we do it.
So one of the things we're doing tonight is figuring out if we're adversely impacting the welfare of the community. That's verbatim, correct? Okay. So I live 2 doors down from that property for 20 plus years. And there's not a single day where I don't hear them playing. And it's gotten, it's there, they do it, it's their property, whatever. But since they started playing pickleball, the noise has gotten noticeably worse. And I can tell you, it is a constant conversation with several of the neighbors. I mean, you can't talk to any of them for any amount of time where they don't bring that up about how obnoxious it is. And people are gonna have different opinions about stuff. People are gonna feel differently. The people that play there love it. The people that don't probably don't love it. So I'm not gonna say good or bad. I am gonna say it's noticeable. And it's extremely noticeable, more so in the winter months when there's no leaves on the trees. So it carries even further. And I'm not only 2 doors down, I'm also downhill, so in theory, I should hear less, and we still hear it. We have white noise machines in our house, just because parts of the house, we just hear grunting and whacking and smacking and all of that good stuff. I don't want to say all day long, but it sure feels like it a lot of days. Now, you have policy, you can control that. The city can do more about that if they choose to later on. But I don't know how noise can't be it. I'm often not comfortable with y'all having not spoken to more people about it. You've mentioned here a survey that you've done about your members of your club wanting to do that. I didn't see a survey in the material or any information about the survey. I also would think that you would have, well, do you have a petition of your members that support this? A signed petition, number of people want to do it, people live in Erlingwood that are like, this is a good idea.
Petition?
Yeah.
We've done 2 surveys, one in 2011, which didn't include pickleball since it wasn't around, and then the other 2 or 3 years ago, we don't have a petition, but we did a close-ended survey. We've got, I think, 30% reporting on that response rate on that survey. About 120 of the 400 members.
And what year was that, you said?
It's 6 months ago. Was that what it was? Yeah.
Okay.
May I make a comment?
The noise issue is real.
Well, I'm
We
just,
take that, yeah.
can you, I would have liked to have seen that stuff be made available to us as part of this argument that you're making, that this is good for everybody.
One thing I will say about the pickleball thing is we have had a pickleball court at the club since November 2021, so it's
Yeah.
been there for about a year.
Right.
I called the general manager of the WAC today to see if there were any complaints about the noise, either tennis or pickleball, and her answer to me there was zero. But I'm not saying that there couldn't be issues with, obviously, you're having, you both are having a hard time with it. But, you know, really, I feel like this project, when I started it, it was really more about tennis, and then we got some feedback. We ran it in our newsletter for 9 weeks. This is what we're planning on doing. And we said, please give us some feedback. And the feedback that we got was mostly like, hey, the backboard is not regulation where the line is. Could you make that improvement? Hey, and a lot of it was, hey, we'd really like to have some pickleball too. Could we strike for pickleball? And that's kind of where it sort of evolved from being just a tennis project to, hey, we could use these as a multi-sport project. I do hear the concerns about noise. Zach and I had talked a little bit, I think it was yesterday, about there maybe is some equipment.
Yeah.
Like there's some changes because of the noise issue, some changes in equipment with some rackets that maybe don't create quite as much noise, changing the balls. And so I believe the club would be willing to, create a policy where we would only allow those materials or equipment to be used on the courts. If the city of Rollingwood feels that pickleball is just a nuisance, which, maybe that's the case, the city could certainly ban pickleball in the city limits, and then we would certainly comply with that.
Can I just say something about the mitigating? I think there are 3 things you can do upon my reading. The paddle, apparently it's not necessarily the decibel level, but the pitch. So the pickleball, the wiffle ball thing, much higher, a little more irritating. And so the rackets and balls, which are foam, bring that way down. It's actually lower decibel level than tennis and lower pitch than tennis. So much better in both of those dimensions. And the other thing to do, which actually we're in a position to do, is to build as much screening as possible. So if you screen it correctly, and it's with a ton of vegetation, which, by the way, I think would just be the most beautiful thing to do of all the choices, that brings the decibel level down about 6 points. So again, it's about 20 decibels higher than tennis. That'll bring it down 6. Just the barriers. I think the equipment, which we'd be more than happy to require, and we're in a position as a club to require that, unlike your neighbor. So we're more than happy to do that, take any of those measures. Yeah.
Last question that I have is, are you still, the plan is still to be a limited members only club? Yeah.
So the genesis of the club, it was, I believe, like, the way it works is sort of based on the deed restrictions that were originally placed when this club was created. And so it is limited, membership is limited to people that live in the Eanes School District. I understand that it's not a public amenity for the whole city of Rollingwood. In some ways, I would argue it is, because it is available. Anyone in the city is, its membership is available to them by the fact that they're in this Eanes Schools District. I would also say that the city of Rollingwood does not provide these amenities. So I did see in the city of Rollingwood survey, I think it was a Strike Force survey, whatever, multiple comments like, why can't these amenities be open to everyone? I mean, that goes back to however the club was created. So I don't even know if that's actually possible. But in some ways, it's kind of nice because the people that aren't interested in using these amenities aren't paying for them. You know, so if you're not interested in using a pool or tennis, your tax dollars aren't, you know, supporting it. So in some ways, I would argue that that's actually a nice thing. And it is, you know, it does provide an important service to Rollingwood residents. Many are members, and they are capable of joining the club. And, you know, sure, it'd be great to open it up to everyone, but I don't know if that's really possible. It's a nonprofit, and there were, I think, deed restrictions with the creation of the club.
So I asked specifically about limited. You said
Limited.
you. Limited.
I think the limit on the number of memberships is also part of that. What?
Well, whether it is or not, my question, what I'm getting at is, you said anybody can go join. That's not actually true.
Well, yes, they had to find someone to sell a membership. That is true. But anyone is eligible to join.
That lives in Eanes School
Yes,
District, right?
yeah.
Okay, yeah.
How many people in Rollingwood are members? Do you have any idea?
I don't have the answer to that.
It's pretty high. Most of the membership. Tolly Bernard, 306 Inwood Road. It's a high percentage. Most of the members tend to live close. And so you end up with mostly people in this neighborhood, Tremont, kind of closer areas. So it's the highest percentage is Rollingwood plus just a few neighborhoods out. The one other thing is we have a very attractive guest fee, and you know it's $1 to bring an individual, and so we bring families all the time that are not members. You know somebody that's a member of the club. We have non-guests that play tennis with member guests all the time, and so there's enormous opportunities to get access to the club through relationship, and so I don't really see that as a barrier.
Yeah. I think what I'm struggling with a little bit is that I love the pool. I think the pool is a great part of Rollingwood. I think it is attractive. I can't dispute anything y'all are saying about that. But it is a limited membership club. It's not available just for people to walk up. You can be gracious about it, but you can also say no. And there'd be no recourse the residents could do about it. And we're trying to do this by the book here. And I'm also kind of just struggling with is you have the biggest concentration of members of Rollingwood. You have, if there was a list of 100 people here saying, we all think this is good, we all don't think this is inconvenient, we all think this will have no adverse effect of us, that would be very compelling. And then it would be a lot easier to go, okay, the pool is going to be held accountable by its membership to make sure they do all of this noise limiting stuff that you're talking about today. So it would be helpful if we had more of that, because I'm not seeing that volume, which I think is accessible to y'all, to make it easier for those of us that are trying to play this by the book.
All right, and I think that's a great segue into the neighborhood comments. Do we have,
Chairman.
unless if anyone has like something you're dying to say that's on the board. Okay, do we
Chairman?
have a list?
I apologize. Can I have a point of order?
Sure.
Just in case I missed it, that you might have said this before the applicant started is when you opened the public hearing.
Okay,
And we will denote that on the record based on the recording for the city secretary. I just wanted to make sure, in case I missed that, if
Gotcha.
you did state that.
okay, so is the public hearing when they talk, or is it now?
No, it would be starting for all evidence to be put
All
into the
evidence.
record. It would have been right prior to the applicant speaking.
Okay, so I do think I forgot that.
Sorry, thank you, sir. So if you would please denote that that is the time of the public hearing. Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay, how many people do we have signed up to speak?
On item 3, we have 6.
6.
Item 4, we have more.
Okay. Well, then it seems like items 3 and 4 are kind of blending together a lot. So we'll start the neighboring party talks now. We're going to do the time limits. They're 3 minutes each. That's per our code, and we're going to enforce that because there's a lot of us. if we do feel like there's more that needs to come out, we'll grant you more time. So, or if you feel like you've signed up and everything's been spoken about, you don't have to talk.
I have a question.
Yeah.
If you signed up for both 3 and 4, then you get 3 minutes for 3 and 3 minutes for 4?
If you
Or just 3 minutes?
want, I'll get you another 3 minutes the next time around. But I'd like to go ahead and get everything kind of squared away now, because everything, it's melding together. If you're talking about 3, you're talking about 4.
Okay.
So if you really need 6 minutes, I'll give you 6 minutes, but let's try to keep it to 3. I usually have a list of names.
Want me to give them to you?
Yes, please.
Call them out.
You'll go ahead and call them out. That way I don't
Chairman.
have to talk.
For purposes, yeah, sorry, so for purposes of the public hearing and the comments related to it, it's really these exceptions have a lot of overlap.
Okay.
Would you be interested in going ahead and calling item 4 and
Uh,
allowing this public hearing to serve as the record for both exceptions?
How would I do that?
Just go ahead and open that item as well.
Okay, so it is
And we'll use
7:10, and I'm going to go ahead and open regular agenda item number 4 as well as regular agenda item number 3. So if when you come up to talk, you're talking about both. And since they're the same thing, more or less, we're going to try to stick with the 3 minutes.
Okay, I'm
So-
still up, right? Dave French?
Yes. State
Yeah.
your name and where you live.
I'm
and-
Dave French. I'm a Buckeye Trail, which I'm actually in Westlake, not Rollingwood, but I'm on the board.
Okay.
So I thought I'd come down. So I just wanted to, I've not been to these type of meetings before. I'm kind of new on the board. I got voted in May. And I just want to take a step back. We've been members of the Rollingwood Pool since '99. And I'm one of those guys, I've recently retired. I'm kind of getting on the end where we're getting up to the 8 to 80 thing. We're a little bit older. My kids have grown, moved on. I just wanted to convey to you guys, the pool has been it's been a fantastic asset for Rollingwood, right? It's one that makes it such an attractive neighborhood. We have loved it and experienced it and used it through, when our kids growing up. And I just look at this whole project, and just to back up and take a step back, the whole project, the pickleball, which I think will expand the usage of the facility, it's just a great way to increase the social capital and just increase the way that people can socialize with each other. I know it is a private club. I think that's some limitations that just came in when the thing was developed. But there are 400 people that live in this community that use it. And the ability to have those courts and have that just really facilitate a better social atmosphere, I think is really, would be wonderful. And this could be a fantastic facility. It's really going to be nice. And just taking a step back and going, okay, there's always issues, the noise level, the setbacks, all that. But taking a step back and saying, you know what, this is really something that's going to improve the overall environment for Rollingwood. And I just think I wanted to express that to you guys, because I'm probably one of the longest members that have been, member of the pool for so long. And it's been, like I said, it's been a wonderful thing. I just look at this thing, I think it's be a wonderful addition to Rollingwood. That's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Zach Elkins, if you have anything more.
Since I've been talking, can I go to the end?
That's fine. That's all right with the chair.
Sure.
Let somebody else talk?
And then I have Marie also. I'll just make a comments.
Marie Timmerman, 501 Vale. Fun fact, today is my 20th wedding anniversary.
Congratulations.
Spending it all weekend. Other fun fact is my husband and I met on the tennis court. So I have a husband and 3 kids, so tennis has been good to me. And I think it is good for this community. Other thing is one of the things, I know we addressed the fact that we do have an approved parking plan. There was some concerns though in one of the emails that came out about parking, so I just want to talk about that a little bit because we are concerned about the community welfare. I know that people look at, we used to have a year-round swim team, and that really, did put stress on our parking for sure. Because like for a swim event, you can fit a whole lot of kids in that pool and have a lot going on. Tennis is very distinct from that in the sense that really you're gonna have maybe 2 people if you're playing singles on a court, 4 people if you're playing doubles. And then if our pro is giving a clinic, he will have no more than 6 people on a court. It's just dangerous with swinging rackets and that kind of thing. So it does not create, tennis doesn't create the same kind of parking issue that some of our swim programs have. I would also make the point that we no longer have a year-round swim team. It has gone over to the new Westlake Athletic and Community Center pool, and they call it the WACWA. So that has actually reduced our parking issues tremendously. So that combined with the fact that tennis is not, it just, 4 courts isn't going to expand the number of cars in the parking lot in any kind of dramatic way. So I think that was that. My other comment is that you seem very concerned about support for this project. I will say in past hearings, more people came and spoke. We also had, I think, about 15 letters in addition to the letters of the 2 neighbors that would be most affected by this project in support of it. I will also say, my experience in Rollingwood is when some people don't like something, they come out and tell you. And I think that milk and cookies experience is really the kind of thing where you have just droves of people coming when it's really, really important to them. They feel like it's really, really negative. This has been before the Board of Adjustments 3 times, and I haven't seen the pitchforks yet. And it's also been before the City Council. I did not see it there. There's been some discussion with one of our members saying that this hasn't been publicized, people don't know about it. I mean, all I can say is it ran in our newsletter for 9 weeks. It was actually in the newspaper after the first City Council meeting about it. There's been public notices that have gone out to the community 3 times now. There are signs posted on our property, and I think all the people that attended the Milk and Cookies hearing, this tennis court item was on that agenda, and we've even had people say, oh, that's where I got educated about it. So I feel like it's out there, and I feel like if people really felt the impact was going to be that negative, we would have that kind of response.
All right, thank you. Next.
Next is Brian Nash.
If you don't have to talk if you don't want.
Could I reserve to the end as well? Just,
I
I feel like it's better to have.
Sure,
multiple
I
voices.
suppose, yeah.
I won't waste anybody's time. I don't have a 12-point.
Instead of rebutting every part at the end, makes more sense anyways. Tony.
Hi, I'm Tony Hudson. I live at 2904 Hatley Drive, downhill from the pool and the Western Hills Athletic Club. And I've also been a member of the club since 1995. I am concerned because I do live downhill from the pool and the park, and I can hear everything that goes on in the park, especially when there's any kind of event. I hear it inside my house and in my backyard. And I am concerned about the drainage plan that they say the engineer has developed, because we know, all those of us who've lived in Rollingwood a long time have seen the changes that have gone on, know that our drainage issues are a big problem, and now that we're having bigger houses and more impervious cover, the drainage problem is something that we have to deal with. And this project, the extra tennis courts, is going to add an additional impervious cover. When I was looking at the page 13 of their presentation, I was wondering, how are people to access those tennis courts? Are they going to access from one gate and walk across till they get to the back one, or is there going to be like outside sidewalks around it? I didn't see. They said they have an improved landscape plan. Where is that? I didn't see that. I saw like just a plat, but what improvement in the landscape plan? Tell me more. Tell me more about how the trees are going to be, how it's going to be an improvement to cut down 23 trees, including large live oaks and cedar elms, and replace them with smaller trees. And how is that going to be an improvement? They're taking out a volleyball court, which is sand, and it's a non-conforming structure, but it's a sand volleyball court, so there's not runoff from that. It's so those are some of the questions that have come up for me as watching their presentation, and I personally did not find out about the project, even though I am a member of the club and a resident of the community. I didn't find out about this until I overheard people talking about the lawsuit that the club has brought against the city. And since I'm, on both sides of the suit, I wanted to know more about it. And so that's when I started trying to find out more about it. And it's been hard because I know that the club has said that they have surveyed the members, but they've been pretty vague and non-specific. Do you want an improvement in the tennis program? Yes. Do you want to cut down 23 trees and put in 2 new tennis courts? No. So that's where I'm coming from here. And so I thank you all for your service, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
There's another Tony on 2403 Vance.
Another?
Tony, too?
2404 Hatley, that was me. No, 2403 Vance.
Tony Brolio, 2403 Vance. And I'm a relatively new resident, been in town for a couple of years, 4 young kids, members of the pool. I think that anywhere you walk around the neighborhood, there's noise, there's disturbances. People that live in close proximity to the facility are aware of that. They were aware of that when they bought the house. I think this will be a great improvement for the club. I think the tennis courts, as Zach mentioned, are in major need of repair, and expanding them I don't think is going to add an incremental amount of noise that's going to be intolerable, especially if the club does what they've said, which is limit the hours and limit the types of equipment used to play the sport. And so I'm in big support of it, and I think it'll be an improvement for the community, and that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm Ann Turner. I live at 301 Almerian Drive. I've been a resident of Rollingwood since 1995. I've been a member of WAC since 1999. I served for 5 years on the WAC board in the early 2000s, I think it was. I do have some concerns about the tennis courts. At the recent city council candidate forum, drainage was brought up as a big issue for Rollingwood. When you review the plans, as I understand it, the impervious cover will be increased to just below the limit for the property. And if we have issues now and they're going to the standards that are generating the issues now, is that going to be a problem? I also have concerns about removal of the on-site trees. Again, at the recent city council meeting, it was brought up that the trees in Rollingwood are one of Rollingwood's best amenities, and removal of all those trees, and there is replacement in the plans. But I would argue that it's not really the same, replacing oak trees with smaller cedar, elms, sycamores, and ash, which are not on the property now. Doesn't really seem to be a replacement, equivalent replacement. I also have issues with the private pool club, or private club being considered an asset to the community. The reason we joined the club was because my kids were excluded from the activities at the club, and where their neighbors, who were also members, were participating. It is a private club. And yes, they have a generous guest policy, but again, my kids couldn't walk up to the pool and hit their tennis ball against the board unless they had a friend who was a member. I also kind of want to bring up what Tony talked about. The board has been ineffective in communicating these plans to the membership. 30% response out of all the membership. It's difficult to get response, I understand that, but I don't think that's really something to show support of the membership. And we really haven't, the plans for the construction plans weren't on the WAC website until this summer. I know they were on the Rollingwood website. Not all members are residents of Rollingwood. So I just think there are just some issues, and a lot of it just is that the membership really hasn't been informed. A lot of members, when you ask them about it, that I've asked about, they understand that the 2 courts existing are in very poor condition. That was an issue when I was on the board. And they think that the tennis court project is repairing those or replacing those. They don't understand that we're adding 2 more courts, we're taking out all the trees in the lower part of the property, and that the board is suing the city. So those are my concerns.
Thank you.
My name is Duncan Ashworth, and I live at 2910 Hatley Drive. I've been a resident of Rollingwood for about 35 years, so I've seen lots and lots of changes. In fact, my great uncle, back around 1950, helped lay out the city of Rollingwood and define the streets, and named Ashworth after himself, which originally was a very long street and then just got cut down over time, but he was very proud of the work he was doing. I actually have more questions, just for my own edification and maybe for the others here too. There were listed 2 agenda items. One was tearing down the deteriorating tennis courts, and I know this is somewhat redundant. Tearing down 2 existing deteriorating tennis courts and reconstructing those. And then the other one was the expansion with the additional impervious cover and cutting down all these oak trees.
2 separate ones. Yeah.
And
Yes, it's 2
yes,
separate
and
ones.
2 separate things. But in the presentation, they were somewhat munged together. So I think it's important to detangle these 2 issues for clarification, because my first question is this an all or nothing thing? Either 4 tennis courts are being built, or are we saying there's A can be approved, which is the rebuilding 2 courts, or B, all 4 courts being rebuilt? So that's the first question I had.
However they decide to do it, it's their choice, but we will vote on separate agenda items.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
We
all
will
right.
not vote them together as
Good.
one.
Okay. They're not being munged together. And the other question I had, I've been to some of the previous variance meetings. So hardship does not have to be demonstrated. Is that correct?
Not on this one. The special exception is kind of a vague term, but as far as I'm concerned, it is, we're under the veil of following the spirit of the ordinance, the zoning ordinance. But if we find something within the spirit of the zoning ordinance that needs a special exception, then we could deal with that.
Okay. So it's a little vague there.
It's very vague.
Yeah. And also it was also brought up the increase in impervious cover. Is that, by doing the 4 courts, is that not an issue anymore?
That's not an issue for us. That's the city goes through the permitting process, and then with the drainage and stuff, we don't, we're not reviewing that
The
stuff. Now,
impervious cover.
if there's something that seems that the city isn't going to look at, that is a health and safety thing,
I see.
then we definitely would speak up about that.
Okay, very good. And the last question was the violation of the setback for courts 3 and 4. That is something that's decided.
The setback, if they want, they're asking for permission to build within that setback, and they're asking permission from us.
This is the forum to decide.
Yes.
Okay. That was it. Just a bunch of questions for
Great.
clarification.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Mr. Chairman, I'd also like to let y'all know, we do say on the agenda that we accept comments up to 2 hours before written. I believe we got one around 5 that we did distribute. Since then, we have received 4 more. Wanted to see how you would like those handled, or if we don't want to read them because they didn't
I personally
come
don't
in.
want to read
Okay.
them. I'm horrible at reading, but
Okay.
after they're done, if someone wants to read them or if you want to read them, that's. I mean,
However you'd like us to
Yeah.
handle it, we're happy to do so.
Okay, well, I'll just hit a few points that I heard in the discussion and see if I can clarify a few things. One is the need for the courts and the demand for such, and why we would want this design in the first place. We have the member survey. We know those surveyed are really excited about it. We think that response rate is extremely high. I do public opinion research, and typically public response rates are around 10%. So this is a high response rate. We have a fair number that are into tennis, but it's true, we could have generated very easily a set of petitions from everybody, I don't know, saying they want to increase the value of the club and improve tennis, and I'm guessing we could have generated that. We didn't. I just don't feel like that's a very sincere sense of what our members want, but you could easily do that. The need for the courts, really, I think you can think about it a little more structurally, which is that if you have kids' tennis programs, well, first of all, tennis is episodic. It happens in the summer mornings, summer afternoons. Nobody wants to play for obvious reasons. In the spring and fall, it happens in the afternoons, and kids are out of school, and also in the mornings with some adults who can get off work. But it's a very clustered activity. Everybody wants to play at the same time. Kids programs take up to at current levels of subscription, 3 or 4 courts at a time, leaving no play for family or member play, much less adult programs, much less leagues, much less combination pickleball, tennis. There is an unbelievable demand for tennis and pickleball in Austin. Right now, a couple of the comments that I read actually as part of the packet for tonight suggested that there's plenty of opportunities to play tennis. If you want to play tennis at one of the tennis centers, and by that I mean Caswell or South Austin Tennis, you can reserve them 2 days in advance, starting at 8:45 in the morning. I'm going to bet you that by 8:46, there's not a single court available for 2 days after that.
That's right.
Not a single court. People set up bots. I know 4 or 5 people with bots who go on at 8:45 to get courts. Westlake High School was a nice spillover spot. They've now fenced the courts. You're not allowed in to play Westlake High, and they have a lot of school programs, tournaments going on the weekends. That's not an option. During the pandemic, when I would play there would be at least 10 people waiting to get on a court. Also, the middle school, Hill Country, thank you. No chance. 2 courts there, completely booked. People are holding lessons there. There's a lot of demand in this. This is one of the best tennis cities in the country for obvious reasons. A lot of people want to play. The design, okay, so the agenda tonight has the 2 items, Brad, as you said. I mean, we didn't request those 2 items. We proposed the design we proposed, which is not a 2-court plan, which is implied in that first item. We proposed only the 4-court plan, which, if you guys want to vote on the 2-court plan, we don't have a 2-court plan, but I don't see no reason why you wouldn't do that. But that's not our proposal. And then with regard to the special exception, I just feel in some ways when the city fathers and mothers put together this code and carved out something for a special exception, this is exactly the kind of thing that they imagined, which is 54 years ago, we built some courts or at least the club was built, of course, a little bit later. And, if people thought that for whatever reason you couldn't reconstruct the courts, maybe expand them a little bit, that to me constitutes exactly the appropriate use of the special exception. I can't imagine any other use. I was looking at the item that was before you. All right.
kind of crossed over. Do
Okay.
you have a final thought, like a quick?
I will
final
say we
thought?
talked to the city planner about this, whether this is the appropriate course of action, special exception. He said this is absolutely the right way to go, and that he couldn't even imagine a project like this not getting special. I'm not like he was predicting what would happen, but it just seems like it's the appropriate use of that avenue.
Thank you.
And there may have been some confusion between public comments and public hearings, so there were 3 people that signed up for public comments, but.
Sure, yeah, that's a confusing term, so.
So, David or Brian, did you want to speak in the public hearing, or? No, okay. And then we have Rick Brown.
Brooke Brown, 307 Nixon. I've been a resident of Rollingwood since 1980 and familiar with the parks and how people enjoy this community. I have a couple of comments, and it's difficult to separate between item 3 and item 4 for me. But with respect to an option to reconstruct the existing courts, I think that that does fit within the scope of a special exception, because special exceptions, both the Rollingwood Code addresses special exceptions in connection with non-conforming uses and non-conforming buildings. If you look at that section of the code, the 107491, there's first a fairly general statement that says a special exception may be granted to permit the reconstruction of a non-conforming building or structure. That does not address expansion of a non-conforming use or a non-conforming structure. So, in reading further in the code, there are provisions that create requirements with respect to expansion of a non-conforming use or expansion of the non-conformity of a non-conforming building. 2 examples. 1, you have a structure on a lot, one wall of which extends 2 feet into a setback. Let's call it a house, let's call it a clubhouse, a structure, let's call it the existing tennis courts that extend into a setback along one side. Can those courts be reconstructed? Yes, on the same footprint. Our code allows that with a special exception. Can you take the fact that that structure does not today conform to give you a different standard for an expansion of a separate or additional structure into a setback that would otherwise require the variance standard? You can't. If you read the code carefully, a special exception allows in certain instances for a non-conforming building to be expanded, but it doesn't allow for the extension of the non-conformity. You could put, if this were a house with a wall in a setback, you could put a second story on that house within the building line, and that would not extend the nonconformity. It would extend the nonconforming building, but it wouldn't extend the nonconformity. That is what our code allows. It does not allow an extension of the nonconformity. And I can walk you through those provisions, but that's what I would say with respect to item number 1. You cannot tag on an additional, and it doesn't make sense to do it that way and have 2 different standards. It just doesn't, you wouldn't write a code that way, and the code isn't written that way. So that's the comment I would have, and I've provided Ashley with a memo on that issue.
I read it. I'm sure we all read
Okay,
it. Yeah.
great.
So,
All right.
thank you.
And the other thing I would say with respect to item number 3 is there's not an application before you for item number 3. The applicants say they're not asking for that. There's not an application except for a reconstruction coupled with an expansion. And in order for y'all to consider it, you've got to give the building permit official can approve some kinds of plans where there's an expansion of a non-conforming building, less than 50%, and it doesn't expand the non-conformity. There's some of those a building official can do, but I don't think this Board of Adjustment can act when you don't have an actual application for the relief sought before you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you call up comments for both 3 and 4? Yeah. Okay, I have separate comments on 4.
Okay, well,
Go ahead.
yeah, you spoke almost 6 minutes, but I'll give you another 2 minutes.
Another 6 minutes?
No.
I'm sorry, I have not, I didn't see the difference in the sign-up sheets, and I apologize. I have filed a memo with respect to, I filed comments that address what I think is the proper standard with respect to any expansion of the tennis courts. And I think the concerns that the members of the public have raised are good and valid. There's the one other issue, and that is that the Rolling Wood Code has a limitation provision in it. If the Board of Adjustment has granted a variance and the applicant doesn't take advantage of the variance being granted within 90 days, then the rights granted by the variance are terminated. They're waived. I know there's been an argument that, well, we've got a building permit that's still valid, but the language in the statute, in the ordinance, is very clear that regardless of the existence of a building permit, the rights granted by the variance are terminated or waived if they're not acted on within 90 days. So there's nothing with respect to the Board of Adjustment's second decision that's still in effect in terms of rights for proceeding.
Yeah, I don't think we're talking about the old variant, so this is a new, completely separate.
That I just want to make sure that that's clear. Yes, they can't tag on a special exception or request for a variance to this hearing because it's not in their application, and any rights under the prior.
Yeah, no, we're here just to talk about this. So thank you.
And then.
Oh, that was 2 minutes.
Okay. All right.
Thank you. Oh, that's right. One more.
I'm sure you all want to go home even more than everybody else here. So I'll be very brief. As to the petition, I appreciate what you're asking. Had we known that would have been helpful, I think we would have done that. It's a little bit of a black box. I think you guys have probably had very limited experience with special exceptions. It's mostly variance requests, and there is a procedure for variance requests. It's not clear what the procedure is for special exceptions, and I think it's been like, I don't know, 3 of these or something. We did some research to try and find out the best way to handle it, and we did it the best way we could. So we did surveys. That's an 85-page packet, and God bless you for reading it, and I know you put the time in on it. I know there's a lot in there. We would have happily added a petition if we'd had the time to put that together and knew it was something you'd be interested in. So I was just going to note that. On the drainage plan, that's in the packet, and I saw a question raised about the drainage plan. It's been something that was developed by a professional engineer. I think they're here tonight, so you could ask them questions about it. It was also reviewed and approved by the city's professional engineer, And by professional engineer, I'm talking about somebody that's been certified as an engineer who looked at like the drainage plan. And I know there's always doubts about those things. When I built my property, there was concern. And because before I built it, it would dump water into the Deviney's backyard. Once we built it, we actually have a cistern that collects the water, and there's never been a problem since in the 7 years we've been there. A similar situation, according to the professional engineers that looked at that, it's going to happen here, where we've gotten a quart and a half. I don't know if you looked at the drainage plan, but that fourth quart and half of the third quart is actually a detention pond. So underneath the quart, it's going to collect all that water and slowly release it, as opposed to what it is now, which is just an open funnel through the back. Landscape plan and tree ordinance, that's also in the packet. It was submitted to the city council. I could pull it up. It's probably page like 83 in the 85-page packet or something to that effect, if you'd like to take a look at it. But it shows exactly like sort of what Zach was describing as a beautiful plan. There's a lot of trees. We're actually putting in more trees than what the tree ordinance requires, along with a lot of other proposed plants, bushes, and everything. And again, as we've tried to really emphasize with both you and community members, we're very open to a dialogue on these things. If people have input that they'd like to provide about other things that they'd like to see, an oak instead of an ash, I mean, I think we're willing to talk about that. It's not something, we're definitely not wedded to a lot of these details. We're just trying to show that we're trying to be over supportive and over conscious about, making this fit in. Same goes to the noise regulations and any other type of requirements that might make sense in order to make this fit well with the community. Because I think, as a final point, ultimately what you're deciding under the special exception provision is this a detriment to the welfare of the community to grant this? And we want to make sure it's not. And I think we've tried to propose a plan that isn't. If you all have feedback that you think would be helpful to make sure that it wouldn't be, that's what we're going for too. But it's different than a hardship, right? Which is a big hurdle. This one's different. Is there a detriment to the welfare? Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Really appreciate your time.
I think that's everyone, correct? Okay, it is 7:45. We will close the public hearing. I guess it is now time for us to talk.
Do you want to hear those four?
Oh yeah, are these things that we've read? Or are these just things that popped up?
They are
as-
not. They've been emailed in since, so they came in between about 5:15.
Are they
and
books or are
6:30. No, they're very short, and I can just summarize
Sure,
how
yeah.
many and for
Just to
and
make
against,
make
if
sure
that's
everyone's
helpful.
opinion is heard.
Sure. We did receive.
Maybe I'm wrong on that.
You just open the public hearing back up.
Oh yes.
Oh, okay, yes. We will open the public hearing back up at 7:46.
So between 5:15 and 6:15, we did receive 5 emails. I believe they were all in support of the variant or of the special exception request. Would you like me to read those briefly? They're
If
short.
they're in
but-
support, probably not as important as those that are in denial, but I suppose they have to get them all.
Wait a minute.
Is that
Well, no, support is for it, right? Isn't that?
It was in the denial part.
Oh,
right.
For audience.
You've got copies of comments in the packet as well as comments
Yes.
that were provided on the dais that were received up until 5:14. So I would say if those are going to be under consideration by the board, then those that are not been printed out and provided should at least be read or summarized. It's up to the
okay, well,
chairman.
then in that case, is there any rules, since these were submitted late, that they're proper? I don't know the right words, obviously.
Your agenda identifies that it should be received 2 hours prior.
2 hours prior.
So anything received post is in your discretion.
Okay, so if you just give us a very general, some summary, if they were for it or against it, I think that's all we.
Would you like names, addresses as well?
Sure, to know if they're live by or if they're.
Sure. So we have John and Marilee Itel at 2801 Vance in support. Tom Mitchell at 2405 Vance in support. Carlos and Gilda Tirado. As my computer decides to shut down on me, I'm sorry. At sorry, give me one moment. I'm not responding. they were in support. We had also Greg Demas in support. It froze up on me and doesn't want to show me their addresses, but that's the
Okay.
the comments we've received.
Okay. Does anyone have any strong feelings about hearing them read? Okay. Then it is 7:48. I will close the public hearing. This is time. Is there a term for what portion we're going in now? An official term to?
You're going into discussion?
Yes.
Or
Okay.
deliberation?
All right. So 7:49. We will start board deliberation. Does anyone have anything pressing they want to say immediately?
Jerry Spitel, lots of issues related to the projects were brought before us tonight, but I think those are larger issues than what's before the board. The simple question before the board is whether we're going to grant an exception to the setback. And I also think a lot about how we've treated others in the past to be consistent. And we've certainly allowed reconstruction of non-conforming structures on a pretty regular basis, so I don't see any problem with that. We've also been pretty cautious about not expanding beyond our simple authority, keeping in mind that we think that setbacks and other rules and regulations have been set by the city council for good reason. So, increasing a non-conforming structure seems beyond what we would normally have done in the past, and it is a difficult thing for me to think is appropriate. Reconstruction of a volleyball court is not the same as the reconstruction of a tennis court. So if there had been a request to reconstruct a volleyball court, that would have been fine, but a request to reconstruct a tennis court in place of a volleyball court seems to be, as Brooke pointed out, kind of pushing beyond the limits of what we've done in the past on other requests.
Yeah, and going on with the expansion, is there an active permit right now, or do they have one going through the system? So granting an expansion would just be granting a blanket expansion, like they can expand any way they want. We don't have. Okay.
Can I just address that point? I know it's not public comment period.
Maybe in a little bit.
I think we are listed as a pending application at least on the city's website presently. If you go to the planning and development and you click on pending applications, we're one of the pending applications.
Okay, well, I'm not sure how the website works, but the city doesn't seem to think that.
Did you get an answer to your question from
Yeah,
the city?
no, as far as they're concerned, they don't think there's.
An application for a site development application was submitted before the initial variance requests a year or two ago now.
Uh-huh.
We're still kind of combing through the code and getting a timeline together of what that means for those applications, but no action has been taken on them since the variance requests.
So if
came
we
before
were
the
to
board.
approve the expansion, are there plans that we can attach this to? Is really the question.
They would have to submit what's presented here in the packet, I believe.
What they have submitted is what this application is based on. So if you want to restrict it, page 10, I think it's
So,
101
okay.
of the.
So the
of
presentation that
sheet.
they submitted and all that, that's, okay, so it's
Yes.
attached to that. Okay,
Yes.
great. I have some stuff to say unless if anyone else wants to say anything before me.
I have stuff to say too, but go ahead.
Okay, essentially, I totally agree for the agenda item 3 that if, to reconstruct, the courts that are there now, totally fine, do it. But I don't think that the expansion of them is within our jurisdiction really it's because I see the special exception is under, like I said before, is under the veil of the spirit of the zoning code, and the zoning code explicitly says many times, you cannot expand non-conforming structures, and I think going through the special exception, if we saw a reason why that didn't like, if there was a reason that we needed to not follow that, I think, but I just don't see anything special. I think I see it just as we want to expand, let us expand. And I don't see that as in the spirit of the code. And so I don't think agenda item 4 can go through. That doesn't mean that they can't build the 4 courts, because I definitely see a way for them to build four courts. But I don't think we can let them expand it. I do think 100% they can rebuild the existing courts.
Okay. I don't think this is about popularity, or if you like or hate pickleball. And you're on one side of the fence or the other. It's not about the trees, it's not about the drainage, it's about what the ordinance says. And that's what we're here to do, is talk about the ordinance. 107491 special exceptions A2 permit the enlargement or extension of a non-conforming use or non-conforming building upon the lot occupied by such use or building at the time of passage of this division. I believe that section gives us the ability to do that.
To do what?
To
let them expand?
To let them expand.
Okay.
Or extend. If you cut through all the stuff, they're not talking about going any farther into the setback. They're talking about extending the setback. You got a good point earlier about, you could have done this a while back if you wanted to take those 2 new courts and move it out. You could have done that. They have their reasons. It's not up to us to say you should have done it or you should not have done it. Their reasons, they're here to say this is what we'd like. That's what we got to vote on. If we want to go into mitigating noise, to take the argument about public convenience and welfare not being substantially or permanently injured, the pickleball lady had an article which Ms. Brown quoted in her denial that says there's many ways to mitigate noise, including sound barriers, including some of the things they've already talked about. What I don't know, and I don't know that the folks at WAC can tell us, is if pickleball is make or break. But I don't think that's the issue. I think the issue is the ordinance and whether or not we can say, yes, you can extend it or not. That's what it all boils down to me.
Mm-hmm.
I agree that we have the power to grant the expansion, but it's a may power, and you know, it's whether, so that's where I'm coming from. I totally agree with your point about point 2. We could agree to do this.
But it doesn't say we must. It says we may.
No, absolutely. We have the power. Arguments were made, we did not have the power.
Yeah.
That we were overreaching even hearing this, and I'm sorry. I totally disagree with that.
Can I ask you a question? So, since special exceptions are new to us all, this is, I think, our 3rd one, do you think that, so you think we have the power to just go ahead and grant them the expansion, but do you find that to be, that there's a special exception being made in order to grant that? I don't speak very well. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Sorry, I don't understand what you're
Okay, so like, I feel like we're supposed to be finding, instead of a hardship, we're supposed to be finding something to make an exception to for a special reason.
What? I don't read it that way.
You don't read it? Okay.
The way I read it is, we may do these things, and prior to granting the special exception, the board shall make a finding that it is empowered under this chapter to do so. I mean, that's what this page is.
Sure.
And that public conveyance and welfare will not be substantially or permanently injured, and is permanently injured, in the granting of this exception. And then it goes on and says the same thing again, to their point earlier.
Yeah.
It's poorly crafted.
So the email that Brooke sent out, a part of it that I found enlightening was the Texas code that grants us the ability to have a board of adjustments. It says under, I think maybe under their variance article or whatnot, that we should act in the spirit of the ordinance. Does that sway you into thinking that we need to be thinking about the zoning ordinance?
Can I jump in here real quick?
Sure.
I'd love to answer that if I can, if you want to jump in first.
Well, I think we have the right to grant an expansion of something that's not in conformance. The problem is, you have ordinance 107-422, which says will not increase the extent of the nonconformity of the building or structure.
Mm-hmm.
It will increase the nonconformity by two tennis courts.
Yeah, no, the zoning ordinance is definitely against it.
So therefore, we cannot go against that ordinance. To me, we can't allow more nonconformity to happen with the extension.
And I would argue you're not increasing nonconformity. You're still at 10 feet. You're just extending that line.
You're extending it
The square footage.
two tennis courts over at 30 feet.
Well, you're not doing it. The net is, I heard, 20 feet, 14 feet. You
Well,
are extending the line, but it's small. But to answer you, so what we just talked about is another instance where Rollingwood code is at odds with one another. Because you just quoted zoning and special exceptions,
Is it within zoning?
but it says point blank, you can do this.
It says you can extend, it doesn't say you can extend and increase nonconformity.
And I argue you're not increasing nonconformity because you're not going any farther into the setback.
I'd say you're increasing nonconformity because you're adding two more tennis courts that are 30 feet back from the property line. They're 10 feet back from the property line,
They're
not
still-
30 feet.
And today you're at 10 feet.
They're at 10 feet and they should be at 30 feet, so you're extending two tennis courts at 30 feet.
You're extending, you're not expanding. Potato, potato.
Okay.
I think this is a good talk. We're figuring out what a special exception is. Any other thoughts?
Did I ever get a chance to answer your question, which I can't even remember what it was?
Kind of. I mean, because you basically said no
Okay.
in a way.
So I definitely agree with I think we have the ability to do it. I think we also have the ability to not do it, because if you read the code in two different ways, and we need to clean that up. I have a backyard PhD in drainage, which is not accredited anywhere. But I will say that I do know rebuilding the existing tennis courts will be way better than what exists today, 100%. I also know our current drainage code doesn't really take into account volume. So even when even when we build things that meet our code, it still produces more drainage than we can handle in certain scenarios. We're not here to debate that, but I do think this is definitely better than what it is today, doing that. So I don't have a problem with that. And I think per our code, assuming that the issues were fixed around the 50% impervious cover, which if not, the city has the ability to do something about it. So I'm not as hung up on that. And like I said, I know a little bit about drainage. I do have an issue with this being given something special to a private entity. And I admit that the club in a park zone is a one-of-one property in the city of Rollingwood. And this body doesn't deal with things like that. We deal with things and we try to be equal with people. We do it. We try to do it historically, or some of us maybe tried to, we didn't do it the right way. Now we're trying to do it the right way. So I'm having a hard time using history as a guide here for that. But when I just look at this, I think there's the adverse stuff. If the club does everything they say they're going to do, and I bet they probably would try, then it's going to be great. But if we give this, there's no guarantee that that's actually going to happen. And I'm just kind of struggling a lot with,
We can word what we pass to make them do it however we want them to. That sounds really evil, the way I said that, but.
yeah, we could, but I
We-
think there's just so much.
We can tie it to
we-
plans and tie time limits to it, and there's ways that if you can think of a solution, we can word that solution in.
Yeah, I don't know if that gets past kind of my next point.
Okay.
For me, I think the club had the unique ability to come in and present more than anybody else a case of this is what the majority of the city of Rollingwood feels is in our best interest and would adversely affect us. And I think with surveys and even providing us that data so we could see it would have helped that argument. I do believe the pool could go, okay, wait, we're gonna withdraw. Nobody wants this to go on any longer. But at the same time, you know, you might be able to go back and clean up some of this and get more buy-in and get more, this is what we wanna go, this is really what the city wants. Right, and make this easy, make this just be about that, because for me, this is really about, does everybody really think this is in the best interest of the city? And I can't see that from what's been submitted. I think some of the noise stuff can be mitigated. The park's a noisy place. Everybody that lives by the park knows it's gonna be a noisy place. I don't know if the way that everything was presented was exactly how things went down to the city council meetings as far as everybody was in agreement, if this was great on the traffic plan. But I do agree that you're gonna have a lot less people for tennis stuff than you're gonna have for any swimming events. So, I'm not convinced this is not gonna adversely affect people that live nearby. And there, while not part of the consideration, there is other ways to do this, and the fact that one of the presenters said, we don't need this. Okay.
So,
You just said, I'm still hung up on that comment about, we think we're in the good to do what we want.
I think Zach was trying to express that the code's very confusing, and what happened before was very confusing too. Since we got 2 out of 3 approvals, we thought, as Zach was rereading things, that there's an argument to be made that those 2 out of 3 were all we needed. We tried to talk about that with the city. They were like, well, if that's true, then the 90 days would have caused that to expire, which none of us appreciated at the time, because again, we were all kind of confused thinking we needed 3 out of 3. We've asked that that be considered by the city attorney, and the city attorney has not yet had an opportunity to get back to us on that question. So I think we're all just kind of confused about how the code operates. This is the very first time that's ever happened in the city of Rollingwood, that the code's in conflict with itself and confusing. I'm sorry, that was a joke. It's getting late, I apologize.
Yeah.
Could I just, to your point about the petition, and survey and all that information, and if you vote to deny the request, I don't know if there's a way to table things to a later meeting. If it's denied, then our only options are to be back here 180 days later, I believe. City attorney maybe can confirm, or we have to file a lawsuit to petition for a writ.
I'll tell you
to the
what, if
district
you
court.
want to take it off the table right now, we can vote on that if to let you take it off, and we'll shut this meeting down.
Well, I want you to have the opportunity to dialogue about it, because I think part of our problem is, I actually tried to have a conversation with Keith about it, and he's like, I don't know that I can talk with you in advance. And so we don't know what it is that you want until we're here. And then you tell us what you want, and we didn't do it, and then it's denied. And it's like, well, that's a really hard civic mechanism then for us to do anything, right? So I would just say, we would love to follow the rules and do everything that you want, but it's unclear what the rules are. And so we would love the opportunity to do it. And if you want petitions, If somebody wants approvals
Thank you,
from.
thank you.
Yeah, but
Let me just, I'll address that quickly. The Board of Adjustments has always been a board of grayness. And there is no cut and dry, this is what it takes to get things done. That's why we discuss it. That's why it exists, to figure out the things that are in that zone that aren't cut and dry. So we cannot tell you what it takes. You present what you think it takes, and then we discuss it. So that being said, I think we should probably vote.
You can ask the attorney if we have the ability to table, because I think we've just had a request to table.
Are you requesting to table?
implications of tabling, does that mean we can come back before the 180 days?
I don't
So
know.
that's what
Yeah.
we need the attorney for.
I apologize. If you'll give me just one moment, I'm looking at your provisions really quick to make sure that we are in compliance. You want to take a 5-minute break?
Sure. Oh, here, I'll talk.
I got one more point.
Sure.
This has been a goat rodeo. Not tonight, but this is the third time these guys are here. They got approved. Then magically, the city screwed up. Didn't notify everybody. We had a do-over. They got mostly approved,
Yeah.
and now we're here.
Yeah.
So
So, yeah, I mean, that's
it's just a
in the
point.
bad. All right, but since we're trying to waste a little time here.
In the interest of extending.
So when you were talking about what you were kind of talking about was like public safety, health things, which is something we have to find. Or do you think it actually was that? Like, do you think that those type like drainage and parking and trees and stuff is something that we should consider? Or let me extend that a little bit more. Because I kind of think of things as drainage and parking and this and that. This is stuff that the city reviews. And we can maybe consider public safety things that the city doesn't have the chance to review.
Yeah.
But do you think that the drainage and stuff should be considered a public safety thing that as the board have
I think if
power?
it's something that adversely affects, in my opinion, Rollingwood is for decades, we've ignored the impacts of drainage.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I mean, just, and
Yes.
it's gonna cost all the taxpayers a lot of money to address that, because we collectively as a city, I'm not pointing blame on anybody.
So you think coming into this board, it gives us a chance to
I don't think
address those
I don't think we need
concerns?
to be crusaders here, I just think
Sure.
if there's something that could have that impact. I mean, I may get this wrong, but when the city added the parking lots, the drainage that's put in place doesn't really do the job that it's supposed to do, and that water goes down this road.
Yeah.
So I'm sensitive to that because it's the cumulative effect. Is drainage from the new tennis courts going to wash out a house downhill? No, it's not. But it's the cumulative effect of all of these, which has problems on the residents and impacts all of our taxes later when it goes to fix it, because the problems are just getting worse and they compound on each other.
Yeah.
And our code doesn't take that into consideration.
Fair enough.
And we haven't enforced that. We didn't have a tree ordinance for a long time. When we put sewer line in, we didn't have a lot of stuff in place to handle it. And I don't think we should get into the debate of all that. But if a property does have something that could impact that and somebody wants to bring it up, I think it's worth consideration.
Sure.
For us to do
talk about
as a body, because it could adversely impact.
Okay.
Can I stop now?
Yes.
I found it. So it says that the board shall decide the appeal at the next meeting, for which notice can be provided following the hearing, which can be that meeting, and not later than the 60th day after the date the appeal is filed.
So we basically can put it on hold for 60 days?
60th from the date they filed. So I would say you can typically table it for a meeting, but not indefinitely. It needs to be
Okay.
date specific. So if we want to say, we will bring this back at a
So what's the
November
latest that meeting
meeting
can
date?
be for them?
Wait a minute.
Is this something y'all want to do? if we
Y-
start
if you
going
have-
down this?
Yes, certainly. You've raised a lot of interesting questions. I think the pickleball noise issue, I think the survey and the petition issue. We'd love the opportunity to address it. It just will take some time.
Sure. Yeah, that's the thing. I wanted to see if I can buy y'all some time.
I mean,
I would state that the board, if you want to postpone action
Uh-huh.
on the decision, we've had our public hearing, postpone it to a specific date, most likely the next meeting date.
Okay, can I postpone it for, say, 180 days, and then they can put in a petition to do it sooner?
No?
No? Okay.
And we don't have a standing meeting date
Yeah.
currently, so I guess we would have to specify that meeting date
Can we,
here at this time. Would that be something we could?
yep, you can see when you have a quorum available.
Okay.
So what was the,
So if we would need to
Have a
need to
quorum.
set a time specific and
Okay.
a date certain, and so we would need to know that we would have a quorum on that day
Um,
if we are gonna do that.
how much time do y'all think they need?
So
to-
I think this should be their decision if they want to even consider this. They've been here a bunch.
Sure.
and
How much
they-
time do
if
y'all
they- This
think
is
you-
really just, y'all are reading the room, you can, I don't think we should make that decision for them.
Okay.
I don't know what the extent that we could do, but I do think,
It just gives you another chance to present to us.
no, certainly, the answer is yes, we'd like the opportunity to present again, to answer some of the questions that were raised today. I don't know on timing, like legally, what you can give us. We've got Thanksgiving coming up and then Christmas. I don't know when your next sort of scheduled meeting is, but there's probably going to be a little difficulty in getting things arranged in that amount of time, so.
Y'all speak up if you got some ideas here.
Mr. Chairman, may I make a brief comment?
Sure, you can, brief.
Under the Board of Adjustment rules, this is an evidentiary-like hearing.
Okay.
And so if we're gonna postpone this hearing to allow new evidence to be presented by the applicant, then there needs to be a process for that to be presented, like the application was presented here, and then an opportunity for people in the community to review and comment on it before there's another hearing set.
I feel like I'm wasting more time trying to save time.
I'd like to know what the city attorney has to
Yeah.
say about that.
Your rules allow that the board may defer action on an application for not more than the time frame allowed by law if it concludes additional evidence is needed, alternative solutions require further examination, or the evidence presented requires further review.
That's different. from
And so
what we
if
just
we,
heard.
but if we feel like, if we feel like another public hearing is warranted, we should have sufficient time to publish that.
Oh, okay, so it's the difference between a public hearing or not. Okay,
'Cause for this, we don't have any requirement.
do you want to come back here and listen to them again, or?
Oh, yeah.
Well, my only concern
We'll,
is
we'll bring
that
cookies.
my
No?
only concern is that I think we're all in agreement on agenda item 3. It's agenda item 4 about the expansion is what we're gonna fight about here. I guess I don't want to hear again about agenda item 3. So let's vote on agenda item 3, and then we'll table agenda item 4 for 90 days.
That sounds good.
Okay, so I move to approve agenda item number 3 based on the board's base. Mhm.
Can you please identify that the findings you found, or the board?
Sure.
is
Okay.
Finding in the affirmative or negative?
This is difficult. Okay, I move to approve agenda item number 3 based on section 107-491 of the city code. Number 1, the Board of Adjustment is empowered under chapter 107 of the city's code of ordinance to grant this special exception. Number 2, the public convenience and welfare will not be substantially or permanently injured in the granting of the special exception. And finally, number 3, the granting of the special exception will not adversely affect the public health, convenience, safety, or general welfare. This is going to be a roll call vote.
And I apologize, can we have a time frame on
Oh,
that?
it is 8:18.
can we have a time frame on
What
what action has to be taken as far as
if,
setting a time limit for the number of months for the applicant to submit for the building
okay,
permit?
so default is 90, right? And this is to submit a new permit? Is that?
To submit a building permit.
Application.
So here's the rub, right? They want to do it as one project. We're carving this up and voting on one and then the second. They gotta
Okay.
go get a
Do you
building
want to give them
permit.
6 months? Do you want to give them 180 days? That way
You
it
understand-
allows
you
to
understand where I'm
align
going?
it?
Sure, okay, yeah. Hell, for 180 days, I'm sure they can get something together. So the time frame for the approval of the special exception will be for 180 days to submit an application. And we will be willing to add on other special exceptions as they are presented. So this is a roll call vote.
For building-
Second.
Okay.
Can I see if I understand that? Does that mean within 180 days we have the opportunity to bring it earlier? Or do you say?
We're talking about just the
But-
first, we haven't talked about item
Yeah,
four.
wherever,
We're
this
talking
is
about
just
item
for
three.
agenda item 3. You have 180 days to submit an application
building permit.
to.
Existing courts.
For a building permit.
Sure, and within that permit that you submit, part of that being the reconstruction of the courts is approved. And then we will hear any other special exceptions you want to add on to that, because obviously we're going to table 4. So, is there a second?
I already seconded.
Okay, great. Roll call vote. Let's start.
Turner, yes.
Shell, yes.
Martinson, yes.
Spital, yes.
Brad O'Donnell, yes. The special exception is granted. Let's move on to agenda item number 4. So are we gonna do 180 days on this one too, to 90 days? Okay. So I move to table agenda item number 4 for 90 days. Is that all I have to say? Is there a second?
Second.
All right.
So, and direct staff to call or you will call a Board of Adjustment meeting within those 90 days, or at the end of those 90 days?
And I guess in my opinion, it would be they would request a meeting within the 90 days. Or do we have to?
We are tabling it, it's yours.
Okay,
The table,
so
yours
then
to
90
pull back off
days
the
from
table.
today is what?
How about within 90 days? Chairman?
Yeah, don't.
Within.
Within? Okay, so within.
Within.
This is fun, right? I'm having a great time.
Is tabling different than them just withdrawing it? I'm not trying to create a mess, I'm just trying to understand this.
Can they withdraw it?
Yeah, tabling says it'll come
At
back,
this point
withdraw
in
means
time,
it's
I would
gone.
not believe
But
so.
but if they withdraw, they can still come back because there's no harm, no foul. Is that-
It would be a
They have to
discretion of the
stop
chair if it's not specified in your rules.
Well, we just tabling, we've already gone
Okay.
this far.
Okay, I'm trying to make it easy.
So then we're seconded on the, I'll say it again. Regular agenda item number 4, I move to table it to be heard again within 90 days. Is there a second?
Yes.
Then I guess we'll do a roll call vote on this again.
Turner, yes.
Shell, yes.
Martinson, yes.
Spital, yes.
Brad O'Donnell, yes. The motion passes. It will be interesting to see how this works out. I'm not entirely sure. I don't think anyone quite is. So since it's within 90 days, just tell us when you're ready, and we'll have a default meeting. I don't know I don't know how to do this.
We'll make a determination as to whether or not additional notice is required in public hearing, or whether or not, based on your rules of procedure that allows you to request additional evidence, that can be presented without a public hearing. If necessary, then we will work with staff on scheduling notices to go out and coordinating for a quorum for the board meeting.
Okay, so to repeat that?
So we will coordinate and review the rules of the
Okay.
board to determine whether or not an additional public hearing is required based on your rules that allow you to postpone a decision to receive additional evidence.
So we're not even sure if what we did we're allowed to do.
You are.
Okay.
The question is whether or not it's gonna require another public hearing, or whether or not everyone comes back and you are allowed to receive additional evidence and deliberate based on your rules.
Okay.
And if it's necessary, then we will coordinate with staff and make sure everything gets done in compliance for that board meeting.
I suggest you plan as fast as you possibly can, so we can get this done correctly. And so no one is, on the last day, is saying this isn't gonna work. So, faster you get it figured out on your end, the faster we'll get it figured out on our end, the faster we'll get it done.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate y'all tonight.
Okay, let me see. It is 8:24. We will end the Board of Adjustment.
I so moved.
Oh, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay. Wow, that was painful.